So I want to talk to you today about this. Why, in my opinion, most brands, most agencies should stop trying to chase audiences in the traditional sense and should start trying to build belonging. So my name's Calvin Innes. I'm a fandom and pop culture consultant and creative strategist. I'm the former ECD and GM of JBM Nerd, Young Format Nerd London. I'm a consulting ECD across a number of different agencies globally, as well as brands including Unilever, Netflix, HBO, as well as quite a few others. Basically, I've spent the last 25 years working at the intersection of creativity, culture, and community. I've also spent the last 25 years watching agencies and brands misunderstand fandom, which is why I've spent the last 10 years hopefully helping them to get it right, because it's a tricky space to work in. So, like I say, I'm going to talk to you today about fandom, because there's a lot of misconceptions about what fandom is, about where the value is, where the opportunity is. So hopefully we can go a little bit deeper and have some kind of actionable things to take away. So first off, what is fandom? I'll start by saying it's not just Comic-Cons and cosplay and gaming. They are important, but they're just a very, very small part of it. Cool. So for me, there's a fundamental difference between audiences and fandoms. They're often treated like they're exactly the same thing, but they're not. Audiences are passive. They're a group of people who you sell your story to. You give them a message in the hope that a small percentage of those will then take your message and they will buy your product, they will buy your service. They consume what they're being fed, and this naturally leads to a high amount of churn. So as you're engaging with your audience, they're eventually going to lose interest and drop off, and then you have to remarket to them, engage with them again, spend more. You tend to get increasing spend for decreasing engagement. Fandoms are completely different. Fandoms are organic, they're active, they're dedicated, they're committed, and they actually give a shit about what you're saying. You're not just giving them a story. So while an audience consumes, a fandom co-creates. And importantly, a fandom means that the brand or the IP that you're talking about is part of who they are. An audience, it's completely passive. A fandom actually shapes people's identity. So there's something really powerful about being able to lean into a fandom. So one of the most important things about working with fandoms is allowing them to co-create with you. And this can actually be a really scary thing for brands to do. So the first half of my career as a designer and as a creative director, I spent a lot of time developing brands, developing brand guidelines and CIs and sticking as fiercely close to that as we could and protecting the brand. And that's what audiences do. Okay? Audiences work perfectly in that space. Fandoms don't. For fandoms, you have to give up a certain amount of control, which for a lot of brands is terrifying. But done effectively, it's incredible. The ROI is far higher, the engagement is higher, the cultural relevance is higher. It unlocks so much more if you're able to tap into fandoms effectively. And the nice thing about fandoms is they co-create with you. So where an audience consumes, a fandom will take your brand or your IP into places that the originator of the brand or the IP could never have imagined. So just a few differences to look at. Audiences are often episodic, campaign-based, whereas a fandom is often multi-year or lifelong relationships. And I'll go into that a little bit deeper shortly. Audiences, we've already said, they are passive. They listen, they scroll, they consume. Fandoms are active. They remix, they create with you. They naturally amplify the message that you're trying to get across because it matters to them. Audiences lead to occasional spend. So they buy products, they buy services, they buy tickets. Fandoms unlock a sustained revenue stream, which is pretty important to most brands. And it also means we have to look at monitoring these in slightly different ways. So audiences, you can track through traditional metrics. It's clicks, time on page, reach, impressions, all the stuff you know. Fandoms are much deeper. It's about stickiness of the story. It's about genuine UGC volume, not curated UGC volume, UGC that's created by people who actually care. It's about participation. So there's two big things that fandoms unlock, and these are the two most valuable things for me. And anybody in here working agency side, if you can go to a brand and you can offer a recurring revenue stream and cultural relevance, they're probably going to bite your hand off. And that's exactly what fandoms do. It's a recurring revenue stream because people are deeply invested, they actually care, they continue to engage with everything you say about the IP, about the brand, and genuine cultural relevance, which is probably the hardest thing to achieve. And again, we'll go into that a little bit more in a minute, but effectively, it's because genuine fans talk. They will talk about the IP, they will talk about the brand, and they shape the conversation online, and they literally shape culture. The other thing to recognize about fandoms, there's a misconception that fandoms are niche. They're not, at all. If you look at the top film franchises over the last decade, the vast majority of them are based on fandom IPs. It's science fiction, it's comic books, it's sci-fi, fantasy, video game universes, and it's not limited to entertainment. It goes across into fashion, music, sports, consumer goods, high street retail, visual culture, the language that we use. Fandoms infiltrate everything. Another misconception is that fandoms are limited to comics and sports and games and that kind of stuff. They're not. Anywhere where there is a community that exists that can get deeply invested in something, where they really care about something, then a fandom will exist. And the interesting thing about this is all of these fandoms contain micro-fandoms. So if you are a fan of cars, there might be a fandom about a particular car brand or a particular aspect of that community. The really important thing about working with fandoms is understanding that each of these fandoms has their own codes, their own signals, their own memes, their own ways of talking, their own culture, and importantly, they each have their own economies as well. So learning to tap into these fandoms and learning to speak the language, recognize the codes, gives you access to a hugely engaged audience who cares about what you're trying to tell them. One of the really interesting things happens when these fandoms cross over. There's not many people who only have one interest. Most people have a main interest, something they're really into. It might be sneakers. They're probably also into food and music and maybe travel. And it's where these fandoms cross over, or where these adjacent fandoms come into line with each other, where opportunity appears. So the example I like to use is Harry Potter. Okay, it's a little bit nerdy, but in the UK, Harry Potter has over 90% awareness as an IP. The only IP that beats it is Pokémon. So 90% of the UK knows what Harry Potter is, okay, which is huge. It's a fair assumption that a huge amount of those people are also into travel, and a huge amount of those people are also into wine. So if you imagine a Venn diagram, you have a circle with Harry Potter, a circle with travel, and a circle with wine. The point where they cross over is where really interesting opportunities come up. The point where all three converge is the sweet spot. So all of a sudden, a Harry Potter-themed wine tour sounds weird, but makes a hell of a lot of sense. And you've got high-spending, highly engaged individuals who are interested in that particular niche. And the fact that 90% of the UK knows the brand makes it not really a niche anymore. The other thing we've already spoken about is that fandoms are the route to deep, sustained engagement. So on average, consumer brands, you're lucky if you can get 2.5 years engagement for a general consumer brand. For the really, really good consumer brands, it can be up to sort of like 6 years before your eye is turned by another competitor and you test the other toothpaste or you test the other deodorant. Fandoms are a little bit different. So there's a number of large studies that suggest that the average sports fandom engagement is 12.5 years. The average music fandom engagement is 9+ years. This is far more than any consumer brand. The thing about the sports engagement is really interesting because 12.5 years is the average across all levels of fandom. So if you look for the really super fans, the people where it's really woven into their identity, that fandom actually lasts decades, sometimes a lifetime. In fact, if you engage with somebody and they welcome them into the fandom before the age of 14, the chances are they're going to remain a fan for the rest of their life. It's why when people get invested in a football club, before the age of 14, they tend to be a lifelong supporter. So if you're able to access that kind of commitment and that kind of interest for a brand, it's obviously hugely valuable. It makes it much, much easier to retarget, to continue to engage, and to actually reap the benefits of working with a fandom. So when I talk about fandom as a media channel, it's not about generating fleeting attention. It's about getting deep, invested engagement. Cool. I want to mention quickly the scale of actual fan power, because again, this is hugely underestimated. Still, and like I said, I've been talking about this stuff for the last 10 years now, and I'm still saying the same thing. The only thing that's happened is that fandoms have become more engaged, higher spending. The opportunity has become bigger. The awareness has become slightly less. So the numbers don't really lie. Fandom drives genuine UGC at colossal scale. It delivers retention, not just reach, and it fuels entire secondary markets. So the first start, just to give you an idea, the global games industry at the minute sits at just under $240 billion, and this is larger than film, TV, and music combined. It's huge, okay? And around about 80% of people say that gaming and entertainment is their core interest. And again, globally, that is colossal. Something slightly more niche, so streetwear and fashion. Over 85% of the content generated comes from fans. So it's not directly from the brands. It's not paid campaigns. It's fan-generated content. It's people who actually care about fashion and streetwear. And again, this is massively powerful. And the average engagement for fashion and streetwear is just short of 9 years, which is larger than any other consumer brand. Consumer category, sorry. Cool. This one, move out the way again. So something that is obviously a really niche thing that isn't anymore. The global anime market currently sits at around about 27.5 billion. And 1 billion of these fans are outside of Japan and China. And that is massive. This is driven by around about just short of 32% merchandising. So the opportunities to partner with and lean into the anime world is huge. And this is really interesting because it does two things, okay? So a lot of people want to lean into it because it's cool and because there's an opportunity there, which is why you get some absolute crap, okay? But if you do it authentically and if you do it in the right way and you recognize the signals and the codes, there are some generally impressive and engaging collaborations. But it has to be done with authenticity. Finally, on this, so the actual impact of fandoms goes far beyond just the figures I've shown you now. So K-pop fans, yes, they generate a huge amount of money, but fandoms have real power. They change political narratives. They have a deeply engaged community who follows what they say and believes the same thing. And that's a powerful, powerful movement to tap into. Gamers aren't just playing games. They're regularly building like multiple billion-dollar industries on the back of gaming. Swifties, so Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour alone generated over 10 billion in global consumer spending, 10 billion US dollars from from effectively a pop star doing a music tour. It was colossal. It's effectively just generated its own GDP. The actual impact of fandoms cannot be underestimated, and it shouldn't be underestimated. It's not a case of just partnering with a gaming IP or partnering with anime. It goes much, much deeper than that. So when it comes to looking at traditional demographics, traditional ways of monitoring this, it doesn't really work with fandoms, because fandoms don't work like audiences. They are genuine communities who care and interact with each other. So the old model, as I've already mentioned, is very much about buying attention. That attention then gets lost slowly over time. You then rinse and repeat. So it's new campaigns, it's investments into new media channels, it's constantly coming up with new ways of connecting with this audience and expanding your audience, because the decay is quite significant, and anybody working in paid media will know over the last few years it's getting harder and harder to connect with people in a traditional sense, and more expensive. It doesn't really work this way with fandoms because they're already deeply engaged, so we need a different approach. What traditional demographics don't show you is who actually creates culture, who leads and organizes these communities, these groups, who converts others to these groups, who brings them on board, who advocates for your brand or your IP, and who leaves when you miss, when a campaign doesn't hit the mark, when it doesn't feel authentic, when it uses the wrong language, who drops out. So the thing, well, the title of the presentation, the thing I kind of wanted to talk about is, what does genuine belonging actually look like? So belonging is having permission to participate. So many brands, so many agencies recommend to brands about leaning into fandom spaces without actually considering whether they have permission to work in that space. And by permission, I mean the community, the fandom, actually believing what is being said, actually feeling like what you are saying is authentic and welcoming you into the space. This isn't about having a brand presence in anime and manga and sneakers and sports and whatever it might be. It's not about sponsoring a team. It's not about having a Roblox experience or a Fortnite experience, because the amount of crap that comes out from brands wanting to lean into those spaces without actually thinking it through and without spending the time and the consideration first is staggering. It's getting better, but it's often seen as a really quick win for agencies to lean into fandom spaces and not do it particularly well. So it's about having actual permission from the fans. And this leads to measuring things in slightly different ways. So you're looking at repeat participation, the retention of the community and the fans. You're looking at creator adoption, but organic creator adoption. Who actually cares about your brand or your IP without being prompted? The community health, the kind of sentiment around your brand, around your IP, how are people talking about you? The contribution rate, so genuine UGC, remixes, and real creators, real fans putting stuff online or into the community that adds to the world and builds the brand. And share of language. How is language around your brand shaping with the fandom? Are people integrating you into the world? Are people really understanding why you're there? Or are people questioning why you're stepping into this space in a way that feels like a quick cash grab? Because if you do that with a fandom, if a brand does that with a fandom, the pushback is generally pretty big. Because you're stepping into a place that genuinely forms people's identity, that they care about, is part of who they are. So if all of a sudden a brand steps into this space and it feels unauthentic, they generally push back. So how can brands show up in fandom spaces? What does this look like? It's about thinking and acting like a fan, not faking it, not forcing it, but actually living it. And for me, this comes down to 3 C's. So we often see brands say that we've grown our fandom, or look at these insights into our fandom. And what they're actually discussing is audience share and reach. It's the traditional KPIs. It's nothing to do with fandom. Fandom is a really valuable concept, but it's important that we recognize it and use it in the right way. Otherwise, it loses value, and we're not able to actually make the most of it. For me, the 3 C's. Community first. So fandom starts with respect. You don't buy your way into a fandom, you have to earn it. And this comes down to listening to the fandom, where they operate, where they talk. Every fandom's completely different. They might live on Reddit, they might live on Discord, they might live through real life events. Every fandom is completely different. It's about being completely authentic to that and understanding it and being able to add genuine value, things that the fans actually care about. And the only way this works is if brands and agencies listen first instead of just assuming they know the right way. Next is about culture. So I've already mentioned every fandom speaks in different signals and different codes. It's not about just dropping into these places without understanding it. It's about understanding the finer workings of those particular fandoms. Like I said, everyone is completely different. To connect authentically with a fandom, it's about decoding those signals and working out how to talk in a language that feels authentic. And again, this can't be done overnight. This can't be kind of like brainstormed over a meeting where you're thinking you want to lean into a particular fandom. It takes time, it takes investment, but the payoff is worth it. And it's about contribution. And a couple of the talks today have touched on this, mentioned it briefly as well. This is often the most difficult for brands to do because it's been so much about controlling the brand and controlling the IP. The most powerful ideas when working with fandoms is through collaboration, not controlling the brand. It's inviting fans into the creative process and letting them build the world with you. When fans contribute, they have skin in the game, they actually care. So they're far more likely to amplify the message, they're far more likely to stay engaged in the long term, because, like I say, they genuinely care about what you're saying. So the 3 C's, community, culture, and contribution. It's a different approach to how most people, or most agencies and most brands, approach fandom collaborations, approach leaning into any of these spaces, because there's an assumption that fandoms still work in the same way that just any other audience does. They don't. It's much, much deeper than that. And that comes with a different way of monitoring them, like we've said. It comes with a different way of speaking to them, like I've said. And it comes with time. An investment of time is so important when you're working with fandoms. And it's the thing that most people, most agencies, most brands tend to overlook. They rush into things. And it's why you get a huge amount of spend on activations that look great and can maybe get a ton of PR coverage, millions of impressions, and then 3-4 weeks down the line, it's forgotten about. Nobody talks about it. It's a colossal amount of money and time spent on these big shouty PR moments that doesn't add anything to the fandom and nobody cares about. Whereas done authentically, there's an opportunity to lean into these worlds and have things that people still talk about 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line because it works. Okay, so I'm well aware that when it comes to doing something like this, it's quite difficult to tap into a new space and to unlock new budgets. So often the conversation that I have with agencies is about, they understand all this stuff. They get it. And there's lots of smiling and nodding and taking notes. And then it's like, okay, we have an existing media spend. This works relatively well. So why would we switch it over? Because it's pretty rare that a new budget is unlocked to apply to a fandom strategy. It's normally redirected from media spend somewhere else. So I want to end on a slide that gives you a few takeaway figures that I think are really important for this. And first of all, when I say fandoms are another media channel, they are, but they're very different. So for me, they are the most human media channel. They're not just blind digital channel that you push your message out to. They are deeply engaged and they are actually interested. And that human element, that emotional connection, is really, really important. So the stats that kind of make financial sense, as far as kind of redirecting out-of-home spend or digital media spend or social media spend, whatever it might be, are these 4 stats. So this is hugely powerful. And when you're talking about getting deep engagement from somebody, 93% of fans say that fandoms actually shape their identity. It shapes who they are. It's part of their personality. It's not just a product. It's not just something they're vaguely interested in. It shapes who they are. So the first task of when you are advertising to somebody or connecting with an audience is already done, because if you've connected with that fandom, they actually already care. UGC from fandoms drives 161% higher conversion than branded content. Brands sell stuff. They give you a message. People are naturally a little bit curious about that. If it's genuine UGC from fans, 161% higher return, because it's coming from people who care. It's coming from like-minded people. The fans are far more likely to listen to other people in the same space who have the same interests as them, so it makes perfect sense. This is probably my favorite, and this is one of the hardest things to do when you're just dealing with an audience or promoting a brand. So fans generate 80 to 90% of the online conversation around culture. So culture isn't shaped through audiences. Culture's not shaped through brands. It's not shaped through news channels. It's shaped through fans. Fandom communities are who drive the conversation and actually shape culture. Audiences feed from the culture. Fandoms are the ones who create it. So if you can tap into that, it's pretty obvious how powerful that can be. And finally, purely on numbers, fandom-driven campaigns outperform paid media by 3 to 5 times. 3 to 5 times higher return on investment for fandom-driven campaigns. And it's a really simple concept. It's proven across the board. And it's just because of peer amplification. You listen to like-minded people. You listen to people with the same interests as you. You listen to real people, not brands. So if you're able to lean into this space and people talk authentically about fandom that they care about, the return speaks for itself. So when it comes to allocating those media budgets and shift them across, it actually makes financial sense as well. So just to end, if unlocking a solid, sustained revenue stream and cultural relevance isn't enough, the fact that engaging with fandoms authentically actually gives much better returns across the board and on all paid media advertising should kind of be enough to convince you it's a space that's worth exploring. So on the back of the talks from yesterday, I do have a LinkedIn profile where most of my stuff's kind of through. I also do have a newsletter and a Substack and a book and all that stuff through there. I have taken the full half an hour, so I don't have time for a Q&A now, but it was planned because we're about to go into the roundtables. So if anybody has any questions about fandoms and wants to explore this a little bit more, I would love to talk. I'm around all day. But yeah, thank you for listening. Cheers.